I think sometimes we get so caught up in analyzing our own lives that we forget to actually live them. I think that in our misaddress of what we actually can do or what we have, we often gain nothing. And I think to gain something in this sense is to be cognizant and aware of what you can do for yourself in a given moment. I think it's selfish to not act for the self. And what I mean by that is not necessarily to say do things solely for you and not care about others and disregard this, disregard that. But whenever you're doing anything, it's important to be the one that's doing it. And when I say act for yourself, I'm really tending towards the idea that there are certain choices and pathways that we can sort of create and choose that align with who we want to be and align with the goals that we actually have for ourselves. And I think once we begin to actually commit ourselves to ourselves and our progression as people and our overall development as people, and especially towards our goals like accumulating the certain skills that we need in order to achieve this certain something, we recognize that all the power lies within both the present moment and within ourselves. I think in giving yourself a fair chance and a fair opportunity to actually move towards your goals, void of, I would say, the perceptions of others is the biggest fear that I think many of us have within any type of expression, creativity, even in things that aren't necessarily expressive or creative. And I think what I mean by doing it for you or acting for the self or acting for whatever, it means to not necessarily disregard everyone, but to be intent in your decision, to be yourself and towards whatever path you choose to go on at this given moment. I think that our commitment to the path is what sort of creates it, because the path and you are sort of the same thing. And I think a lot of times we can't actually get anywhere unless we start where we are. And I think sometimes we allow certain doubts to percolate into our idea of ourselves and our idea of what we actually can achieve as people. And I think we have to learn how to be more decisive. And that's something I'm realizing subtly and more aptly. I recognize that in times where I'm like, okay, I'll try to do this, or I don't know what I really want to do in this given moment, I'm met with a certain amount of uncertainty and a certain amount of discomfort with the uncertainty. And I realize the discomfort is not necessarily with not knowing, it's with not choosing. I think we know what we choose in a way. And if we choose to actually indebt ourselves and invest into ourselves, then I think a lot of the fear and a lot of the anxiety surrounding our future and surrounding where we're going is going to diminish. I think when we're actually working towards a definite means and a definite goal and a definite version of ourselves, then it presents itself a lot faster when we actually allow it to, in a way. And when I say allow it to, I'm really stressing the idea that we get to choose what we want to do. And this isn't often a thought that I think many of us have when it comes to our free time, when it comes to anything we do. Like, I started picking up meditation again and a certain amount of writing. And usually when I used to meditate in the past, when I was meditating, I would be focusing on the things that I wanted to do in the future. But I think sometimes we have to tell ourselves, like, that's then and this is now, and we need to commit ourselves to where we are. Not in the sense to say not caring about what's yet to come, but recognizing that what's yet to come will come regardless. And if we don't take the time to appreciate the moment that we're currently in, then it's not going to be appreciated. And we're not going to actually be able to reap the benefits of any type of appreciation for what it is. So overall, I think acting for yourself is in a way really giving yourself a chance, really giving yourself an opportunity to be in the world that you're actually inhabiting. I think if we can't really give ourselves that, then it's sort of like we're grasping at straws when it comes to our passions, our desires, and whatever we see in the future. I recognize even in myself in these couple of days where I've been trying to reinvest into myself and give myself an accurate opportunity, I noticed that when I actually am doing what I can with what I have, that there's a lot more joy in the mundane parts of life. I think some of the stress we feel in all of our situations and whatever, I'll say all of our situations, like our interactions, when we're just out and about, when we're doing anything, it can all stem from our inability to choose how we want to be. I wouldn't say where we want to go, but how we want to be. Because sometimes we don't know exactly how our day is going to pan out. We don't know exactly this step, that step, that step, this step. But I think if we're more present in our times of actually working towards ourselves and working towards whatever it is that we want, or at least present enough in a general sense to actually carve out that time and be genuine in our pursuits, then we'll find ourselves being more genuine in our day to day, more genuine in pretty much everything we do. And I don't necessarily know why exactly it is, but if I was to assume or have some type of intuition about it, I think it's because we're actually showing ourselves something. Instead of just telling yourself or thinking to yourself, oh, I can do this, you're actually beginning to do it. And I think that's why doing is more important than trying. Because to try is to somewhat doubt your capability. Not necessarily in the sense of you can do something, but to say when you tell your mind you're trying to do something, you're already pushing to yourself that this something is not attainable, at least to a subtle extent. To try to do something is to acknowledge some type of possibility, but I think doing it accommodates us much more. I feel like to try is to be in your mind about it in a way. Like when I'm trying to, I don't know, fix something, I'm thinking about this, that, and the other instead of just fixing it. And I don't mean just fixing in a sense of not thinking about it, but not positing, the overall outcome of the action in some type of uncertainty. If it doesn't work, it won't. And it's important to do. I think that's what gives a lot of drive into what I have been doing recently. Because if you start doing things to do them, like if I'm just going to meditate, if I'm just going to write this thing, and then it ceases to be about, do I have the ability to? Can I do this? And then you take a step away from some of that doubt that already surrounds and clouds our minds at times. I recognize that all of us have a little cynic inside of us. Or at least I've recognized the way at which our mind somewhat takes away some of our potential in its address of possibility. And when I say that, I mean sometimes when we have certain thoughts like, oh, I want to try to do this, or if I make some type of creative piece, the overall analysis we instantly give to it, or the analysis we give to whatever we're doing while we're in the act of creating, I feel like is representative of this cynic inside of us. And I think to befriend the self in this way is not necessarily to combat that type of voice or combat those negative thoughts with more positive thoughts. It's to exemplify a life that's inconsistent with those cynic thoughts. Like your thoughts can say, oh, this poem you made is terrible. But if you genuinely try to express gratitude for the poem and maybe even create the poem not in expectation of creating something quote unquote good, I feel like these certain limitations in quote unquote goals that we set for ourselves in terms of the connotations we place on what we do often limit it. Because if you stop worrying about the good and bad aspects of whatever it is you're doing, you'll start to just do it. And I think in just doing it, you're allowing yourself to do it. And allowing yourself to do it is becoming the most genuine version of whatever it is that it can be. And I think in that way it is quote unquote good. Because good is a somewhat subjective term especially when it comes to your creations and your art. I feel like if you're not the first one to validate it, then you can't expect anyone else to. And I think the greatest validation is to not even put that good and bad up to consideration and start to create an essence of creating. I think that's why it's more important to affirm the self than the path, because if you're filled with good and you're filling yourself with some type of motivation, some type of discipline, some type of affection, intimacy, love, care, then it's going to seep into whatever work you do as long as you're present enough to do it. And about the general anxiety that surrounds that at times, I think that the only true way to dispel it is to notice it, to acknowledge it, to recognize that it's not necessarily characteristic of what you're doing. It's just a subtle part of your mind's reaction to what you're doing, but it's not necessarily a determining factor of how well you do and how you actually are within doing it. And I think once we do that, then we recognize that little whisper that we hear is a lot more quiet than the world that's actually around us, so long as we're actually intent on being in the world around us. And what that means to me is not being so trapped within the mind that we can't actually experience within the world. And I think meditation recently has helped me be able to do that. I would recommend that to anybody. And affirmations intently and in practicing gratitude whenever you have the opportunity is important too. I think when we actually, again, commit ourselves to doing something for us, doing it for you, then, and actually doing it too, you are sort of left at this odds and recognize that a lot of our potential is being squandered and our misaddressed of how other people are going to interpret what we do, or even how we would interpret what we do. I think if we never give ourselves a chance to do it, then there's no point in speculating about how it's going to be received here, how it's going to be received there. And I don't mean that with grand things like I'm not going to go out and commit a crime, for example. That's not something I would do to see if it, the reaction. I think more so with things that actually can benefit us. The things that we actually can invest in that would overall assist us in our lives and our overall paths as people. And I think doing things for yourself isn't just about the discipline aspect either. It's not about, if I want to be a writer, constantly writing. And I talked about this in the last video, I think. It's not about the constant writing. It's about what you do while you're writing and how free you want to give your attention and expression. And when I say free, I mean without judgment. I think if we don't judge ourselves so readily, we won't judge others so readily. And I think that's part of what I'm experiencing too. Because the more I've begun to not judge myself for certain things, the more I'm able to just accept both the world and other people's, both my shortcomings and other people's shortcomings. Because at the end of the day, it's just a connotation that I'm placing on action. And whether or not I want to establish that there's a boundary there, it's up to me. But if there's no boundary, then there's no point of feeling some type of expectational emotion or some type of negativity in reference to the external world. Because when we do that, I feel like we bring it inside of us. Because we're somewhat telling our mind that we're dependent on some type of scenario in order to be happy. And I don't mean that with grand things. I don't mean that with like death. I don't mean that with traumatic things. I don't mean that with anything in that regard. I mean that with the things we constantly limit ourselves with on the day to day. Like just your general anxious and doubtful thoughts about what you're actually able to achieve, and especially about whether or not you're deserving of the achievement itself. I think if a lot of us felt deserving and felt like we were valuable in and of itself, we would pursue things of greater value. And that's because I feel like when we value something outside of ourselves, we sort of posit some of our value within it. And I think if we think we're very valuable, then we're going to try to achieve things of equal or greater value. And that whole thing, I think, is a rat race in and of itself. But I think overall, it's important to recognize that if you invest value in yourself, then the displacement that you feel between you and your goal are going to feel lessened. And I think if we can learn to value ourselves void of our goal and recognize that our goal is sort of being achieved each and every moment we're actually trying to achieve it, then we can give ourselves the validation and the gratitude that we need to actually keep going and keep achieving this certain something day in and day out. And I think that's why I think the greatest achievement is truly yourself. Because if you can learn to do things with yourself in mind and learn to accommodate yourself in terms of your own mental processes and in terms of your own action, especially, then your mind and doubt won't have too much groundwork to run with. I think it's about alignment, truly, like not waiting for the right time, but being the right person, not waiting so intently on circumstances to line up for you to actually be able to do something. Like a lot of our goals, a lot of what we want to achieve can be started where we are. It can be not necessarily achieved where we are, but it can at the very least be started where we are. And I think in starting it where we are sort of taking away some of the limitations of our mind already. Because a lot of us think we have to have the whole set of tools in order to complete simple tasks. We don't. We don't need the full setup. You don't need the, I used to make YouTube videos off of my phone. There's certain things that I think we have to, give ourselves a certain amount of credit for. If I want to do this certain something, then why not give myself what I need to do now and do it for me? Not necessarily do it for the expectation of its goodness. Again, I feel like all of that is just a gambit that we play with ourselves, and it sort of limits our ability to actually express ourselves freely. When I say express ourselves freely, I don't mean just in terms of like me speaking to y'all, but express ourselves freely in terms of actually living the life that we want to live and actually being the one that gets to live it. Overall, I want to thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. And for all of you that have sticked here, thank you. For all of you that haven't or are new, thank you anyway. I appreciate all you guys nonetheless. Book on the way again. I'm pretty much complete with it. I just put some poems in there. I hope you guys enjoy those. As for a tentative date, I'm thinking July. I like the idea of July. So stay tuned for that. Keep y'all keeping going. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, doing what you can with your have, and